Hello, welcome back to All for Women's Football back-to-back shows. This is a bit unusual for us, isn't it? But we had to do something on the Olympics, and look who I've got alongside me to talk all through that. We'll give her a proper introduction when we return, just after this short intro. As you can see, Olympics, we're here. It's nearly there. We're going to talk all about it in just a second. Yes, hello and welcome back to All for Women's Football. As you can see, I've got the amazing Miriam alongside me, who, as soon as we said we're doing a show on the Olympics, this was the person I wanted for this. Because if you haven't already, I'm probably going to shout this out a number of times throughout this. Miriam is currently doing a little mini series on the Olympics in terms of each group, and you've had amazing guests on to talk through individual teams and things like that as well. So I'm sure we're going to reference all of that as well. And you've interviewed the defending champion, current coach of obviously the Canadian team, Bev Priestman, as well, which I'm sure we'll reference as we go on. And we're going to start with Canada, of course, being a defending champ. So firstly, Mira, thanks for coming back on. How are you doing over there?
Of course. Thanks for having me. I'm doing very, very well. I'm so excited for the Olympics. It feels like it's here so quickly. I feel like July has flown by so fast, but I am so very excited for the Olympics, and I'm very excited to talk about the Olympics with you today. So, yeah.
It should be good. You're repping, obviously, your new backdrop as well. I say new, you've had that quite a while now, but for people who maybe haven't seen it, it's full Canadian, which fits in well with the first topic now. So
indeed,
that's going to be good. So I will just ask you off the start as we get into all this. That's the beauty of live broadcasting. We get things wrong occasionally. From a Canadian point of view, as I mentioned at the start, obviously defending champions, what's the kind of feeling going into it this time around from over there?
I think it's a pretty calm feeling, and I think if you compare I guess our expectations and feelings going into Paris with last summer, I guess with going to Australia and New Zealand, it's a bit different. I think there's a lot of differences with the squad that we're looking at, but also I guess with the stability of the team. And I think we'll talk about stability is kind of one of the factors going into Paris with how different teams look with stability in terms of the coach that they've been working with. Because, I think, I'm not sure if people have recognized, but over the last 12 months, 6 out of the 12 teams have done some kind of managerial changes. And if they've not done managerial changes, they've been a few things off the pitch that have kind of surrounded the team. So I think going into this Paris, Canada is in a pretty comfortable composition. They've renewed Bev Priestman, which we'll talk about in a moment. It's looking like a pretty good, solid squad. And there was a few initial surprises with the selection of Gabby Carl being left off to the alternate list, and Sydney Collins, who hasn't played a single minute this year, being called in. Sydney Collins, to nobody's surprise, got injured, and it was Gabby Carl that caught it. So if there was a bit of a shock move, that was kind of all cancelled like a few days ago. But I think there's a confident feeling, and I think when I've read pretty much every kind of article or prediction or heard a podcast talking about this Olympics, nobody's really giving Canada a chance, like not even a chance to podium. And I remember, like at the send-off series here in Toronto when Canada played Mexico twice, Bev Priestman said, it's kind of great that people are counting us out and we're kind of flying under the radar, which really is the reality of things. And I took a look at the odds of the ESPN odds this morning. Canada's like ranking 5th, maybe, like nobody's giving them a chance. But I think that's good. I think folks are a little bit too focused on the European nations. Obviously, Spain coming in as the reigning World Cup champions, even though they're debuting. It's quite interesting that a debuting team comes in as the reigning World Cup champions. But Canada has been undefeated in the last 10. They have had a pretty good streak. The players that are coming in look like a very good, solid set of players. I think the improvements that we've seen from the World Cup have been monumental. It's a completely different team, really, that we're looking at. Thankfully, there's been a change in the federation where we're not seeing any off the field discourse. And so I think it's a pretty calm, confident, and I would say like silent threat working with this Canadian squad that I really do appreciate. And I guess it's kind of good that not a lot of folks are giving them an eye, and it's a team to perhaps underestimate, which is crazy to say given that they are the Olympic reigning champions.
I think that's it. I think that a lot of that potentially goes off the World Cup, and I think when we come to talk about Germany as well, and Brazil for that matter, I think they can both be put in that category of an underwhelming World Cup this time last year. Mm-hmm. But I agree. I've not heard anyone that I speak to about the Olympics. It's no one is talking about Canada. But like I said, that's really weird when you are the defending champs. It's really bizarre when you and then not considered one of the favourites. Now, obviously, Spain are doing amazing things, and I think they are probably rightly the favourites right now. I think they probably are playing the best out of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
It's strange not to be in that conversation. I feel I don't remember what the conversations were like pre
Yeah.
2020.
Well, also to mention, like Canada's, this is they've podiumed 3 consecutive tournaments, so it's not like a team that doesn't do well at the Olympics that somehow suddenly out of nowhere got gold. They got bronze in 2012. Bronze in 2016 and gold in 2020, 2021 for Tokyo. So it's not a team that does not know how to do well at the Olympics. You know, I think it's funny when you look at Canada is that they're a very good Olympics tournament team, but a very bad World Cup tournament team, which is ought to think about because the Olympics is a different kind of animal. You've got only 18 players. You know, this Olympics, you've got 6 games in almost 15 to 16 days. Like, that's a ridiculous turnaround time between one game to another. And a lot of teams can't deal with that. But whereas with Canada, they won that bronze in 2012 and they've been able to pick up from that momentum and from that energy and continue to podium. So I think when we discuss Canada, it's not just a team that somehow got a gold that people have written off or said, you know, it's a fluke or a lucky somehow tournament during COVID. Like, they've consistently podiumed and they've been a tough team to beat at the Olympics. So I think that also kind of adding that context of, yes, they've been on the podium a few times before should also be quite relevant and mentioned as well.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Obviously, your first 3 games from a Canadian point of view on the 25th, the 28th, and the 31st. So literally 6 days and the 3 games in 6 days. That's quite the turnaround. NC, yes, True did answer your question. She's there. Well, they're all there already. There's been a few photos on they've done the on the pitch walks there, haven't they? And walked around the grounds, I think, from what I saw earlier. So. Yes, all of that is there. So from a Manchester United point of view, yes, Jay Riviere and Mia Zhao, which we'll come on to when we talk about Japan in just a second. I reference it there. From a Canadian point of view, I think the World Cup can go under the underwhelming phrasing, if you want to call it that.
Sure.
What do you reckon they would have learned from last year? Obviously, you mentioned the tournaments, I guess, are structured differently. It's obviously a longer in the World Cup than the Olympics. Do you think they would have taken anything from that? And what have you seen in development going into the Olympics?
I think there's been huge changes from the World Cup now building up to the Olympics. And the first one is just the way they play football and their system that they're building up with. So their formation that they kind of set up with and the formation that they tried to build going into the World Cup was, you know, your standard 4-3-3. And it just seemed like it seemed like it was easy to figure out for opponents. And it seemed like Beth Friesman was kind of figured out really before they would go on the pitch. And so it was a series of really bad decisions from you had a formation that was already kind of figured out by the opposition. It did not play to your players' strengths. I think Canada, when you look at, for example, their fullbacks or their wingbacks, which is what they've been using to really build up with their strengths, you've got the likes of, you know, Ashley Lawrence, Jade Rose, Chloe Lacasse, who has been really neat on kind of that wing back position. So you had all these players that were versatile and can add a lot of threat, kind of inverting or going on the wings. That just wasn't kind of on display at the World Cup. So you had bad formation, you had the players not being able to play their full strength, and also had a bit of a loyalty issue, I think. And Beth Friesman mentioned that when she joined me on the pod to talk about, is that she tried to make everybody happy with the player selection. And one thing you know about tournaments and kind of competition is not everybody can be happy, right? You can't play with loyalty. You can't start a player who you don't believe should be starting. And so it was a series of bad decisions. It was like a bit of a domino effect that World Cup, on top of the fact that they were having some federation discourse. And it looked like a deflated, defeated team that just did not have, I guess, the locker room synchrony that we so see with this Canadian team. So after that World Cup, completely changed the set of players. Obviously, you had the retiring of Christine Sinclair, Sophie Schmidt, another veteran of Alicia Chapman being out with she just gave birth to a baby. So you're seeing a bit of a different squad, more youngsters coming in, which was extremely needed. I think Canada was like the 3rd oldest team on average or something. Like, they were not a young team. And what we do know about tournament football is that it's youth that's winning these tournaments nowadays. You know, England, Spain, it's the youngsters, right? And so they got to see a bit of a change up era of players and the set of youngsters that we have in the squad. And Beth Friesman completely changed the style of football that they play. They're kind of doing this, 3-5-2 style of play where there's a lot of action on the wing back. They're overloading up top, and they're able to play it, very solid center backs in the back, three center backs, and they're kind of able to keep clean sheets and stay defensively tight, which was a huge major issue at the World Cup. Is like that backline was consistently open, and so they've changed formation, they've changed the set of players, and loyalty's kind of gone out the window. Players who Beth Friesman has had to make brave decisions, tough decisions, going undefeated 10 games in a row. They had to qualify for the Olympics on the back of the World Cup. And I think maybe that is often overlooked of like they had to play Jamaica twice after they just crashed at the World Cup. That's a really big task after what was a very shambolic World Cup. And so I think they've kind of regained their self. They're brave in the decisions that they make. They've changed their style of football where it's not completely figured out when they go on the pitch. And I think it's a diverse set of players that it's not the same. It's a completely different Canada going into this Olympics compared to the World Cup. And I think that's exciting.
No, absolutely. I think just on the I was going to call it the roster then. It's rubbing off on me now. But what you're just referring to there, and kind of what you were saying, only 18 players for a tournament with such high turnaround is brutal. It is, and I think when you're looking at kind of rotation and things like that, that's going to be even more important in getting players on and off the pitch in terms of those games. If you're comfortable in a game, kind of your 2-3 goal margins, that's when you're looking to start getting players off, ready for the next one. Although there's obviously can't be that complacency with the quality of players that are at this tournament and the teams that are there as well. Kind of one of my final questions from a Canadian point of view before we look at the group more as a whole, I guess, who should people be watching out for? Kind of who's going to be the heroes for the Canadian side in this one?
I think the hero is, and maybe not a very popular answer with your crowd, but probably Adriana Leon.
I knew you were going to say it.
And I think when you look at her form this year, like 2024, she scored the most amount of goals. She's created the most kind of attacking action. And she's just been relentless. This is the best we've seen Adriana Leon in a Canadian jersey, which is crazy to say because she's been involved in the system for over a decade. But it looks like something's clicked in her. It looks like she's got that aggressiveness. And I think, maybe she's not the best dribbler and maybe she's not, the silkiest on the ball, but she brings in a lot of chaos into the box. And if you know a few things about Canada and the box and some chaos, is they do love to draw a penalty. In fact, that was a huge talking point last Olympics of how they won the Olympics was drawing penalties in the box. And how you get that is just bringing a lot of chaos, kind of like weird, quick, unpredictable movement that Leon brings into the box. But on top of that, I mean, she's shown a non-dying spirit. She is just fearless, and I think she is going to be a player that Canada, I mean, you can't really rely on an attacking player to just score your goals. It's going to be more than just one. But I think when you look at Adriana Leon, the form that she's coming in with, this new style of flair of like just being not afraid to go in and attack, is really going to be important for Canada. And so I think, there's a set of players that I think will be players to watch out for, and opponents will definitely be thinking twice when she's got the ball on her. But Adriana Leon is one that I think she might be the clutch hero if she times here and there. So she'll be my lock and guess, I think.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew as soon as I asked that question that Leon's name was coming. I think, to be fair, I was literally just having a look while you were speaking out in terms of the other players that Canada have, and I think obviously you've got the bigger. I hate calling them that, but the bigger names obviously that are in the WSL at the moment, like the Lawrence Buchanans and obviously Julia Grosso, who's recently moved over stateside as well. And players like that, but so it's nice to actually hear a different name. I feel like not that Adriana Leon is not a big name in her own right, but it's somebody different. Even I kind of thought you would say her, but it is. I think maybe for other people that's maybe not the name we're expecting to hear.
Yeah.
And I used to think it was Ross as a kid before I was a bit more familiar with the American terminology. It rubs off me, honestly. I flick between the American terminology.
Yeah, my bad. I'm sorry.
That's all good.
I think often when we chat long enough, you start saying soccer, like Canada soccer. I'm like, whoa, did I just convert him right there?
I don't know about that. I don't think I'll ever say those words. I do like to think some of my British phrases are moving across those.
I would say so. I would say so.
But it works both ways.
Yep.
Broadening it out, then let's look at Group A. Obviously, the group that Canada are in. Got France now, obviously home nation, Colombia, and New Zealand. How can you see this group kind of faring up? And obviously, you've got France in there, as I mentioned, home nation. Do you think that's going to be a bit an advantage on their side? You know, having obviously most of the crowd with them as well. And do you expect it to be? It sounds bad saying, I guess, a formality that Canada and France are going to be the top two. But is that kind of how you see this group going?
Well, I think this is probably one of the least chaotic groups if you look at Group B and C. I think it's an interesting set of teams because obviously you've got France and Colombia who didn't make the Tokyo Olympics, and then you've got the reigning Olympic champions, but then you've also got New Zealand who are going into like their fifth consecutive Olympics. So there's a bit of a different storylines that you're bringing in here. And I think, if we're to break it down team by team, New Zealand are coming in with perhaps not the smoothest run of games. I mean, they haven't faced the top opposition, a top 10 opposition from over a year ago. They haven't, they're winless in the last 5 games. They've struggled to, get a good result, which certainly doesn't do much for their confidence coming into the game. And I think it's tough to, it's harsh to say, but it's hard to see how New Zealand can match the quality of players that they have with the players that they're going to go up against. And that could be Colombia, that could be France, that could be Canada. The level of players, the quality of players is just different. It's day and night. And on top of that, New Zealand are coming in with their interim head coach taking over because their actual head coach is stepping away for the Paris Olympics. So they've got, a locker room problem to figure out. And so for New Zealand, I think, I want to give them an edge of possibly grabbing a draw, but I just don't see that happening with the recent performances, with the recent kind of improvements, which unfortunately we haven't seen many improvements. They had a great World Cup, but it's not the same head coach. We're seeing 10 new Olympians. I mean, sure, this is their fifth consecutive Olympics, but 10 new Olympians is a really tough, number to deal with. I think France certainly are going to come in with the home advantage on home soil is different, but also France have never won a major tournament yet to this day. I think if there's one to win it and there's one to podium, it's got to be this one. And I think France, the issue with them is they're either really hot or really cold. They could be one of the hardest teams to beat on their best night. Their midfield could be clicking beautifully, up front Katoto. I mean, good luck stopping her. But there's other games where they've looked really flat. And I look back to that final, the final that they had against Spain not so long ago. They were completely outplayed, which was kind of disappointing to see because it was like a top opposition. It was a final. It was, are we finally going to see France be able to get over the line? And we just didn't get to see it. And so for France, if they can figure out their consistency, I think it's going to be a really, really hard team to stop. They've got the players on paper and on the pitch. They've got the good nights that we've seen. And they're on home soil. They're going to have home crowds every single game. And so France should, have a good chance of going ahead. I actually do see them topping the group. I think they'll start up really, really good, really strong. I think the game against Canada is going to be interesting. They have some bad blood against each other in the Olympics. When Canada won the bronze medal, they knocked out the Canadian, when Canada won the bronze, they defeated the French. Same thing, 2016 Rio. They also knocked France out. So those two are going to be really exciting to see. As for Colombia, they have a few injuries going into this one, and particularly in the midfield, which is I'm intrigued to see how their midfield start up. But more than the midfield, I actually want to point out the fact that the two goalkeepers they brought in, neither of which have played a single minute this year. And that's because their number one goalkeeper has been out with injury. And the two goalkeepers that they were rotating with, neither of them got called up in the 18. They're in the alternate list. So, how are you going to manage a ring rust or a player, or specifically your goalkeeper who hasn't played a single minute this year in goal? And so for Colombia, they're a tough team. We saw that in the World Cup. They're so exciting and they're so dangerous on the break. Linda Caicedo, Maya Ramirez, tough threats. Colombia can totally get really good results. I think it's going to be exciting as it's just really hard to look past the injuries that they have in the midfield because both of the players that are out were integral in their World Cup run. So I think Colombia can comfortably get that third playoff spot, kind of that third spot because, I mean, for those who don't know, it's 3 groups. The top 2 move forward, and then you've got two of the teams that finish third that can go through. So I think Colombia, if they put themselves in a good position with a good goal difference and be able to stack up points as much as possible, they can totally go through. But I think it's France to top it, Canada to runner up, and probably Colombia to be able to get that third spot. And hopefully they go through because it's a very exciting team. But, putting a goalkeeper that hasn't gone a single minute this year in your midfield, which is injured heavily, that's tough to work around. And again, it's 18 players. It's not like you've got much to work with either.
No, I tend to agree. And I think I think you're right in terms of when you're looking at the groups. This is probably the one that I looked at and thought this is probably the easiest, and it's not easy in any way, but it's the easiest I think out of the 3 to predict. I think when we come to the other 2 in just a second, we'll see that. Kieran's gone for a France and Colombia top 2, but Canada can still qualify, as Miriam just said there. The third place do go through potentially as well. You've only got 2 out of the 3 third places do go through. So there is a good chance of making it through, providing, I think if you get 1 win and come third, you'll be fine. Mm-hmm. You should get through with 3 points.
Which is, when you look, you've got New Zealand, like you can certainly secure a pretty good result in third. Yeah. Which is why I'd say it's fair to knock Colombia into that quarterfinal round.
And I think what's going to, I guess, hamper the other teams maybe a little bit that's going for that third place is because the groups are so tough, you might see some draws. And if they can only get a couple of draws and that gets 2 points, that might not see them through in third place. But I want to come to that in just a second. NCSE question about African teams. I'll come to that literally in a second when we talk about Group B. George talking about obviously the last World Cup with Colombia, as a lot of people saw. It took a lot of people by surprise, I think, last year. A team that, again, no one was really talking about came into it and played exceptionally well in the games that they played as well. So I agree. I think it's definitely one to watch. I don't see them getting above Canada and France, but I think it's one of those. It's just ones you want to keep an eye on. It's not ones that you can go into. And to be fair, any of these teams we're talking about, there's a reason. There's these are the best teams in their specific regions. Repping those regions. So yeah, I think that's an interesting one to keep an eye on. Alan makes an interesting point. No Team GB, but over 30 WSL players at the Olympics. Yes, there's a lot of WSL representation across the board. So ones to keep an eye on there. TJ's come straight in there. So let's move to Group B just very quickly. I want to kind of go through the groups broader, and I do have a couple of questions on specific teams. TJ said that Zambia are the lowest FIFA ranked team in the entire tournament. They're definitely dangerous. So Group B, for people who haven't seen it, USA, Zambia, Germany, Australia. Now, USA and Germany can probably again fall into the bracket of a disappointing World Cup. Germany specific. I want to come back to Germany as a separate kind of question because I have a specific question on them. How can you see this group going? And also following up on what TJ said there about Zambia, can you see them being a threat in this group?
Absolutely. I mean, the Olympics, you've got the 12 teams. Like, it's a different beast than the 32 teams at the World Cup. Every team is going to be guns blazing. Zambia could be, I mean, they are coming in as the lowest ranked FIFA team this entire tournament. But, I mean, somebody just mentioned Barbara Manda scored a ridiculous amount of goals. Yep, there it is, at last Tokyo. And they're a terrifying team on the break. They've got the likes of Rachel Kudanji, who can thread in some really neat balls. Barbara Manda, currently second in the NWSL Golden Boot race. She can score, and she will catch you if you're snoozing. They're a very, very frustrating team. They don't always kind of play that like low block that teams anticipate them to do. They play a bit of a mid block. And they're a really exciting team. So I don't think anybody should be counting Zambia. And I actually, just earlier today, there was a presser with Emma Hayes with the US. And she said that, you could win every single game, but you could lose every single game. You could go into a game, like, nobody should be looking past the likes of Zambia. Nobody should be looking through the like, you cannot underestimate any team this Olympics, and Zambia is not a team to underestimate. It's certainly going to be tough for them to possibly get out of a group like that. But I mean, you highlighted Germany, who I don't think they've made the adjustments that you would necessarily see them or expect from them since the World Cup. I think we've seen some, starting 11 selections that perhaps have not been the best. They just lost a game against Iceland, a 3-0 game against Iceland, which not for a minute when I was watching the game, it looked like they were going to come on for a comeback. Now, obviously, sure, they were not going crazy hardcore because, it's a week and a half out from the Olympics. But Germany, new head coach, very similar to the US and the group. It's just really hard. See, the Olympics is just so tough, and this group is just something. So Zambia, you can't count them out, and Germany, I think, I'm enjoying the fact that they've kind of recognized that Pop cannot be their number one Lord and Savior every single game. Keep her on for 90 minutes. They've kind of, started to recognize moving past that era. So Germany, I don't know if we've seen the best kind of Germany, which is crazy to say because they did actually win the Olympics 2 Olympics ago, but they also missed out on Tokyo. So last time they were in the Olympics, they were champions, but they missed the Tokyo, and then now they're back in with a very tough group. So I said this in my preview, but like it could be between Germany and Zambia in that third spot, which is kind of crazy to say. And then obviously the US, I think there's a lot of eyes on that with Emma Hayes. It's a different era where we're seeing a completely different US women's national team from the players. Sure, a lot of experience has been left out of that squad and kind of retired, but it's a very, very exciting team. I mean, you look at the attacking options, they're really scary. And I think what Emma Hayes does with great attacking options. We saw that for so many years at Chelsea. They haven't, had the most clinical few games, and they haven't scored a lot of goals under Emma Hayes. And I think it's interesting to be able to sit down and say what we're expecting from the US with Emma Hayes, because we haven't seen that many games, between them two. We haven't seen what a fully prepped, a complete, year of the US under Emma Hayes looks like. So we're just like the other teams, we're kind of in for a little bit of a surprise of what the US is going to look like. So I think that is going to be super, super exciting. I think, the US is always fired up. They're not a team to underestimate. They could very possibly top the group. I mean, absolutely. Why not? But then you've also got the likes of Australia. I mean, how fun is that? And Australia is a team that has gone so close to the podium. There's going to be a big question of the what if Sam Kerr was healthy, what if Sam Kerr was still here. But in some ways they got a taste of that last World Cup, and they had to work around not having Sam Kerr. They got the opportunity to see Mary Fowler flourish a little bit more. Hayley Raso, Hayley Raso with Australia is also a bit of a different Hayley Raso to club, right? So I mean, folks, if we haven't been watching Hayley Raso so much with Real Madrid, who she's obviously announced departing, it's still kind of a different Hayley Raso we see in an Australian shirt. Caitlin Ford, you cannot discount how just threatening she continuously is. She's really grown with this Australian team. Her and Steph Catley work so beautifully, with each other on the left flank. So it's a tough group. The US, it's not going to be an easy run for them. It's not going to be an easy run for anybody this tournament. But yeah, I feel like Australia and the US might be able to not comfortably, but those two would secure kind of the top two. And then I really think it's between Germany and Zambia, the final two, which may not be a very popular opinion.
I was just about to say, I was trying to think as you were kind of ending that off there and thinking who would my 1, 2, 3, 4 be in that group. And I'm really struggling to actually think of a 1, 2, 3, 4 in that group, because you've sold me on Zambia. I think they can cause some problems now. I'm not like I didn't before. I don't know. Australia for me are very hit and miss. Occasionally I watch them and think, yeah, they're very, very good. And they've shown they're a very good team. We saw that at the World Cup, obviously being home advantage there as well. But Germany, I never like writing Germany off in any tournament, because they somehow just managed to find a way of picking wins up. Albeit I said that about them last year, and that didn't go too well for them. I think Oberdorf obviously is going to be a massive miss now for them in the midfield. I agree. I think Germany, for me, when I look at them, they're a team pretty much in transition. I think they're kind of going for, like you mentioned, obviously Pop being one of the examples. I think they're kind of going from that old guard, what used to work, they need to start going down the kind of the younger player route. Looking at some of the, especially I look at their back line, I think that's probably where they need to start changing up the most. Again, I don't want to be ageist on this channel, not that 30 years old in any capacity, but I think when you're looking at your back line, and most of them, or certainly have been for the last year or so, when they're all kind of 30 plus, that can be got at with a lot of pace, particularly a team like Zambia. When you're talking about that as well, and Australia and US for that matter, running at that back line. Have they moved on enough from the World Cup? I don't know. We've kind of seen them recently in, you mentioned the Iceland game. Did it mean too much to them? Probably not, because obviously they'd already pretty much qualified anyway at that point. So I don't know. I'm with you. I think the top two is probably US and Australia.
Could be a toss-up between it could be a toss-up between who actually tops the group and who comes as a runner. And I like this team, this group specifically. Like, I don't know if we'd see a result that we would call a shock result. Like, if Zambia are able to pick a really good result against likes of Germany, I don't know if I'd call that a shock result. I don't know if we see shock results in this Olympics, particularly because of how tight it is, and tightness is like written all over that group. And somebody's mentioning, the US is going through a managerial change. Germany's going through a managerial change. Germany, I mean, literally the worst possible outcome of losing a player just happened of Lena Erberdorf. Like, it's not like they're all coming in ruled out on a red carpet, ready to smoke through everybody. It's not going to be like that.
No, I agree. I think you just referenced it there. Emma has put a comment about Emma saying that she hasn't had enough time to get to know kind of ins and outs of the squad, and I think that kind of backs up. Someone said this a bit earlier on that Kieran just put it there. Is it too early potentially for her as well? So that was actually going to be one of my questions. So I will go for that now in terms of how you think that's going to fare for her. Obviously, first big chance to show what she can do with this side. Obviously, there's talk. I think that's confirmed now. That obviously, Carla Ward is going over with her as well. Over to Paris as part of the backroom staff. How can you? Is it too early for her? Do you think, or do you think she's a good enough manager that the short amount of time she's had already that she's fully prepared for this already?
Well, I think one thing that we can't do is underestimate what Emma Hayes can do. Right? I think we've learned in many occasions when she's been with Chelsea is you cannot underestimate what guns she can bring on the pitch. And two, I mean, she's monitored the team before she actually took over her role. But at the same time, it's always intriguing to see how club managers kind of switch into international football. And like Vlatko Androvsky, right before her, he was a club manager and he was rated to do really well with the US. And, Jill Ellis had just left. And it was like, yes, Vlatko is going to be the new man to lead this team. And we didn't see that success translate from his club football to here. And by the way, he's doing fantastic right now back in club football. And so I don't think we've seen enough challenges set against the US that has really put Emma Hayes under pressure. And you kind of can't fault her because we just have not seen enough fixtures. They had Costa Rica right before the break. It was a little draw. Costa Rica with probably like some of their best defending ever to keep the US scoreless. But it's hard to know what you can expect because we just have not seen it enough. And there's been a lot of hard work from behind the scenes, and there's been a lot of preparation that Emma Hayes has put in with this. But I mean, absolutely, it's on the cards that maybe this is too soon for Emma Hayes. Has she been through the toughest of situations with this US side? Has she seen them go 2-0 behind? Has she seen them go 1-0 behind? Like, what has Emma Hayes fully seen from this team to go into Olympics, which is going to put you under pressure? It's going to put you, in tough positions. Has she gone through these tough positions with the US? So I don't know. It's really hard to see because we really haven't seen it. But at the same time, she has one of the most talented rosters this Olympics. I mean, that front line, again, it's terrifying to see. And they unfortunately lost Catarina Macario during the preparation phase. So absolutely they can pull something great off. But it's hard to say because we haven't seen it as much. So somebody said they were not criticized for not scoring against Costa Rica. I mean, to be fair, Costa Rica had some like ridiculous defending. It was one of those games that just nothing would go into the net. So it's not gonna be like and I don't think anybody's expecting this to be the best US ever. We learned that lesson at the World Cup, and it's going to be the same. This is not going to be an easy time for the US. And them not, winning gold is also on the cards. Like, I don't think that should be a shock to say either. Certainly not for me. What about you, Connor?
I don't know. I think you can definitely achieve a lot in a short period of time. I agree. I don't think she's had the tests yet that she's going to see with the national team at the Olympics, that's for sure. Who do they start? Is it Zambia, their first game, isn't it? US. So I don't know, and I think there's a lot of I think there is a lot of pressure. I think TJ made the point. Was it? And someone made the point of it earlier on, saying about how US fans in particular, it was TJ, anything but a gold. I feel like for them is probably going to be a disappointing thing. I want to come back to that as an overall question.
I want to say that like the women's game doesn't work like that anymore. You cannot go in thinking you can win gold for any fan base, and especially this Olympics. Like it's going to be the most unpredictable Olympics. You've got 50% of the teams working with new head coaches. You've got really 12 tough opposition. You've also got a weird Olympics in terms of like there's no Sweden, no Netherlands, which you're very used to seeing. Like it's a different kind of Olympics, and it's going to be exciting, but also very unpredictable. So I don't think any team should be going and thinking, not even Spain, I wouldn't even nod it to them that they're going to go and smoke everybody and win gold. Like I don't think that exists in the women's game anymore. Maybe it did like 10, 15 years ago, but no more that a team goes in thinking they can just win gold.
No, absolutely. And I want to come back to Germany in just a second, but you mentioned Spain there. So we're talking obviously on Group C. And this to me is probably the hardest out of the groups for me. I have no idea. I'm going to think while you're chatting away in terms of what my 1, 2, 3, 4 is going to be, because I don't even know. I've got no idea. So for people that don't know, Spain, Japan, Nigeria, and Brazil in this one. Now, obviously Spain, as you mentioned, World Cup champions. Brazil, a very good team in their own right, albeit a disappointing World Cup. Last year, Japan absolutely battered Spain in the World Cup last year. Obviously didn't get quite as far. And Nigeria, another team which stacked with quality all over the pitch, and again can cause teams a lot of issues as well. How can you see this group going? Because this, as I said there, this for me is the toughest out of the three.
Yeah, I mean, you got to give yourself a head scratch when you're looking at this group. And we can highlight Japan because I think it's a team similar to Canada that nobody's really giving them props and nobody's really talking about them being real contenders. I think Spain is a very smart team in the way that they play to their players' strengths. They're not the most physical team, so they're not going to come out and try to have physical battles in the midfield. They won't do that because they'll lose that. They play to the players' strength of being super efficient, clean, tactical, quick. And so sometimes they're gonna have a lot of possession. Other games they're not gonna have a lot of possession. You look at that 4-0 win that they had against Spain. I think they had 23% possession, if anything. And so they're super, super clean. They're efficient. And I mean, granted, that game's efficiency numbers were through the roof. I don't think Japan's ever played that of an efficient game. But Japan is smart. They don't roll out the exact same starting 11 every single game. They try to tweak things depending on their opposition. And I think that kind of makes Japan pretty unpredictable with what they're going to come out with because you don't exactly know which players they're going to come out with. They're, have a few lingering injuries, but nothing too major. I think Yui Hasegawa is going to be a player that she's always like a silent killer in the midfield, and I hope she gets the praise she deserves this Olympics. And Japan shouldn't be underestimated at all. And I don't think we should also just talk about their 4-0 win against Spain, because when you assess their entire World Cup, it was different kind of Japans that we saw. Like I mentioned, they play to their strengths and to their opposition's weakness. And that's kind of like the Japanese style. And I think what's so interesting in this group, not only is it really tough teams, but it's also different kind of schools of football. Like Japan and Nigeria, that's going to be so fun because you've got a very physical team to a team that plays complete different kind of football. And I think that's what this group is going to bring, is different styles, different footballing schools going against each other. Speaking of Nigeria, this is their first Olympics since the 2008 Olympics, so they've been out for some time. Again, nothing too major with their squad. Obviously, Ashley Plumtree not in it. She was a huge part of their World Cup run. She's injured, but she wasn't selected. And you look at Nigeria, you look at their attacking strengths of Oshawala, but they've also have had moments of unbalance in the midfield. But at the same time, they're very gritty. They're fast on the break, and it makes Nigeria just as a tough team to beat as Japan. And then you're looking at Brazil, which I think Brazil actually, and I don't know if people have kept an eye on who Brazil play, but Brazil have played Canada probably 10 times in the past 2 years. So I've seen maybe too much of Brazil, actually. And I think disappointingly, I want to say that Brazil has not really changed a lot of things from the World Cup. And I don't think in terms of mistakes, I think you see the same errors. And they're dealing with a new head coach. but they're also dealing with a completely new set of roster. I think, like I just have it here. Brazil left behind 14 players from last summer's squad. All right. So when you do a little bit of math, 50% of their squad going into the Olympics changed from the World Cup, and they're working with a new head coach. And so Brazil has got a lot of different elements to work with. They haven't completely fixed a lot of their errors. They did name Debinha, which, you could say she's still kind of picking up her form. It's crazy to me that they didn't call up a player like her. So few injuries are lingering on the squad, 50% turnover from their last tournament. I don't know if Brazil's going to have a seamless, world, tournament this time around. So certainly not a team to underestimate, and certainly a team to pose their own threats. But I think when you look at a huge turnover like that for a team like that, they haven't, fixed a lot of their errors from what we saw last World Cup. They often get caught snoozing. They're coming in as one of the older squads. Not to say that age is a bad thing. Like, we've established we're not ageist here on the chat, but it is youth within the team. Stats tell you that. Some of the numbers tell you that. But we can talk also about the big dogs of Spain. New head coach. I think Spain, absolutely they're the favorites. I'd put them in as my favorites too. Good luck trying to stop Spain. Not a lot of teams can stop Spain. But also, Spain needs to be careful because they've conceded 15 goals since the World Cup. They've lost 2 of those games. 15 goals across 14 games is not a really great ratio of conceding. They've had 3 games where they conceded 3 goals. A few more games as they've conceded at least 2 goals. So Spain has been leaky in the back, and what's made up for it is that they can score a ridiculous amount of goals up top. They beat Sweden twice, but one of the games that they beat Sweden was a 5-3 result. They've conceded 3, but can you really go out and score 5 goals every single game? And so for Spain, they can score the goals. They can, have as much possession as they want because they are a ball possession based team. But are they going to be able to stop the leakiness from the back in the moment that it matters when, you've had a day and a half to recover and you're playing with some rotation? So it's a matter of, are they going to be able to stop the leakiness in the back? Like I mentioned, 15 goals conceded in 14 games is not the smoothest stat line that you want to be working with. So this is going to be a tough group. I think if, we are to name a team that I think would underachieve, perhaps Brazil. I think Brazil could be the one to shock a few folks, which is really, really sad to say because this is Marta's last tournament with them, and it pains me to say it. But, I think Spain should be able to get out of the group. They create enough chances, they score enough goals to be able to make for a deficit if they do concede. And those number 2 and 3 is just so difficult to figure out in such a good group. So I think it's going to be exciting. But when you think about this group, it's C for chaos, and I think we're going to see a lot of chaos. And Japan could bring that chaos, so it's going to be intriguing.
Just that first game is obviously Spain versus Japan as well. I think I've got my 1, 2, 3, 4 now. I think I'm going to go Spain, Japan, Nigeria, Brazil. In obviously that order. I think Japan. I think so. I think Luke put this a bit earlier on, but Japan are just love watching them. They're so energetic when they play like that. They remind me a bit of Spain in the way that they can keep the ball very well. They're very well drilled in that respect. The players that they've got, you obviously mentioned Hasegawa, Miyazawa as well. I think Ueki as well coming off the bench. Miki Hamano as well. These are I could reel off a lot of players in
the entire squad.
They are a very exciting team to watch, and if they can get the game plan right again against Spain, there's no reason they can't top the group. Because I think they will. I think they will win the other 2. It's that first game I think will bump them to second in that group, and then I think it's a shootout between Brazil and Nigeria in third. But I don't know. I think it's. I'm with you with Brazil. I don't think they didn't impress me last year. Obviously, from a biased point of view, obviously, no Jace. Obviously, from a Brazilian point of view as well, left out, which surprised me a little bit. I can't lie, considering I think she's done okay for Brazil. I think obviously from Manchester United, you could argue that's maybe she's fallen off a little bit, but I think for country rather, she's been fine. So that was a little bit of a surprise. So I really don't know. And in Spain, I think as you mentioned, I think TJ did make the point that no one has ever won. No World Cup winner has followed it up with the gold medal.
They're debuting. And like I mentioned, this Olympics is a different animal. When you see some head coaches come out and be like, we just played 6 games in 16 days, like we're knackered. Like it really is a different beast. So I'm interested to see how somebody as big of a team and as huge of an odds is debuting. How will they do? We've never seen Spain in a position like this. Like never have we seen them go back to back to back this quickly. You know, their players are probably very familiar with going back to back to back with club. But that'd be interesting. So yeah, this is such an unpredictable group that yeah, and it's so fun. I'm like thinking about all the matchups. It's gonna be so good.
Literally this week as well. Not got long to wait to watch much of these. I think it's. I'm with you. I really don't know. I think Spain. I'll come to my gold, bronze, and silver. I don't know why I did it in that order, but gold, silver, and bronze prediction in a second. But I just think Spain. Just watching them, I think just watching Spanish teams. Obviously, you know we've seen. I know this isn't comparable. We've seen the men's Euros recently, and I think Spanish teams in general. Just watching them on the ball, like whether that's men's, women's. You watch the academy sides, the youth teams. You're watching the under-19s at the women's Euros at the moment. Every Spanish team know how to play the ball well and keep hold of the ball and play it at quick tempo, and that just makes them exciting to watch. And I think that Japan versus Spain game is going to be incredibly exciting to open up that one for that very reason. You've got me really excited. I wasn't as ready for this because of just the amount of international football we've seen over the last few weeks.
It's been wild.
Just looking at that group, I'm incredibly excited now to keep an eye on all things there as well. On that one. Before we kind of come to prediction, I've got a couple of other questions on specific teams as well before let's wrap this one up. Is there anyone you think that's being overlooked from a player or a club or a national team point of view? Do you think there's an individual player that's maybe not getting spoken about enough? Do you think there's a nation that's maybe being overlooked a little bit? What's your thoughts on that?
I think overlooked. I don't know if overlooked as in like not given, like kind of underestimated. Is that what you mean with overlooked?
Yes. Sorry, I was muted.
Yeah, no, you're good. Underestimated. I think Japan. I think you cannot put them off. You can. It's been surprising to see how people are writing off Japan because they tailor their game plan against their opponents. If they look at the brackets, they can put themselves in a really good position to make the semis. You lose the semis, you have a really good chance of winning bronze. I think Japan is my pick to do really, really well. I hope. But at the same time, like I mentioned, this Olympics is so just unpredictable. And I think if we're calling out a player, I think Yui Hasegawa. There's been so many, talks about a lot of the US players are going to do really good, and this is a player for Spain who's also going to do really good. But let's talk about Yui Hasegawa. Like, she does not get enough praise for club or for country. She really makes that entire system work. She gels in so well. If she's having a good game, Japan is probably going to have a good game, and she does not have many bad games. So I think Japan and Yui are two to really keep an eye on. And I'm personally very, very excited to see how they're going to be able to work around that. So Japan, Yui are my picks of a team to even if they don't podium, which I think is something that we need to keep considering this Olympics because it's just so tough. They're going to be a team that are going to impress a lot of people with the way they play and win a lot of fans, which is I think what's so fantastic about these tournaments is that it's only 12 teams, so you're keeping your eyes on not many teams. So it's not like with 32 teams at the World Cup you can keep up with 32 teams at some point, whereas here 12 teams, you're kind of watching the same 12 teams in 2 weeks, so you're able to keep up with who's doing well and who's doing not so well. So I'm hoping Yui Hasegawa and Japan have a good one, because they've been building really nicely, and like I mentioned, they tailor their game plan, which we don't see, as consistently with other teams.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that, and I said also about the WSL season that she doesn't, I don't think, get the credit because she's not a massive goal scorer and things like that. She kind of does the work in the midfield that kind of goes under the radar a little bit. So, yeah, I tend to agree with that, actually. I think because of the group that they're in, obviously with Spain, I think it's slightly overlooked a little bit on that one. Right, we're being asked the question. We're going to have to do our predictions here. So Emma's asking, is a European team going to get a medal? So I'm going to ask you for your bronze, silver, and gold.
God.
In what? I appreciate this is a tough one because I'm asking the question. I've not even thought about it myself. In terms of what mine are going to be.
It's funny. I looked at the brackets. I've been looking at the brackets every day, and you could have so many different outcomes. And I can't remember on top of my head because there's been, different 20 million different brackets that have gone. I mean, is a European team going to win it? Possibly. You've got France, who, if there's an opportunity to finally podium and win something, it's now. It's going to be a matter of, are we going to finally see them click in? They're not dealing with a lot of injuries. They've got Katoto, so I think you have to give them the good chance of making it to the podium. But similar with Spain, like I mentioned, they're the team to beat. Um, they're the reigning champions, but at the same time, can they deal with 6 games in 16 days? That's a good question. Like, we haven't seen them in that position before. So it just makes it so tough. But then, like, it's a tough one. I get it. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's see. 1 to win it. Oh, Connor, it's gonna give me a mental breakdown. I think. Listen, I think I'd have to nod it to Spain. And I think, again, looking at the brackets, they could actually get Japan in the final again, with like the weird, if somebody makes it into the 3rd spot. I think a Japan Spain final would be an intriguing one, and I think if either of those medal, that would not be a shocker. France, Spain gold medal. Goodness. And then it's so tough. God. I think you would see in a bronze playoff, perhaps Australia, Canada. But see, then you're leaving off France and the US. Like, it's just so tough. So I guess I don't know if I have a top 3 here for you, Connor. I think what we're going to see is, this is going to be a good Olympics. We're going to see some really good football. We're going to see some really competitive games. We're going to see some surprising matchups. We're going to see some great matchups. Who's going to win it on the top 3? I don't know. And it's crazy because we're starting in 2 days and I still don't have a solid answer for those 3. So I guess I don't have a solid prediction for you, Connor, unless you have one that you want to offer to us.
No, I was just having a look at the bracket in the way that this could fall. So the runner-up of Group C plays the winner of B. So that's the winner of B. Let's just say by assumption
Japan,
that it's going to be the USA. Then Japan USA is going to be the
like, you see what I mean?
Potentially, if Japan obviously comes second in that group. And I'm just having a look at the rest of them. So the runner-up of A and B play each other. So that's a potential Canada, Australia kind of matchup if we're going off our predictions in terms of how we've done it. And it's just the winner of C, so Spain, would play the 3rd in A or B. I expect, if that is going to be Spain, I would expect them to get past a Colombia. Germany or Zambia type team. So I'm not too thinking there. So I think who plays the 3rd place team? So the 3rd place teams are the winner of C and the winner of A.
So they're facing like toppers.
Yeah, so it's either
Spain or
from
France.
Our predictions, it's Spain, Japan, or Canada and France, based off what our predictions are. So good luck, 3rd place teams.
Yeah. But I love that about the Olympics. Like, you can kind of, have a sense of who could win the World Cup because you have 32 teams. There was multiple rounds. But this Olympics is so tight, and you don't have your regular, I don't want to say Great Britain because they're not your regulars in the Olympics, but you don't have the English players that perhaps everybody's been riding the wave of the English players the past 2 years. You also don't have Sweden, who are always, at the Olympics. And then obviously you have the US, but have they been as convincing? Like, I think for me, this is really going to be the most unpredictable Olympics. And I'm just really hoping for a great showing of football, for women's football. I feel like it is going to be that. And I think we're all in for a really good treat. I hope so, at least. No injuries. That is my final wish for this Olympics.
I was going to say that feels a perfect place to end on what you just said there. So no more injuries. We've already seen enough of those over the last kind of few weeks as well. NC's going, not my prediction, but preference. Canada for Riviere, Japan for Miyazawa, and Australia for soft spot. It's for those neutrals or non-United fans out there, I think it's pretty obvious as to who NC is supporting from a club point of view. I'm not against that. Riviere, 2-time champion. Yeah. And FA Cup winner now as well. I'm all for that. I don't know, but I think my 1, 2. I've not even said my 1, 2, 3. I think it will be Do you know what? No, I'm going to go for Japan. I will go for Japan as
Okay.
gold.
We like
This is
it.
going to surprise everyone. Spain aren't getting to my final. I'll put Spain as the bronze. I think they'll get to the semis and lose. So I think Spain in bronze. I think France. I'll put France in second and losing to Japan in the final. I think home crowds can do a lot for you and really carry you through.
US crowd is after you, Connor.
I was gonna say, I've not put US in the top 3 there, have I?
It's just that tough.
I mean, yeah, I don't know how that works into the bracket. Who's knocking US out, but somebody is.
Somebody
on that one. Right, we'll round it off there. Miriam, where can people find your little mini series that you've been doing on the Olympics? Because you've done 3 of those episodes already and interviewed Bev Priestman, as I mentioned at the start. Where can people find all of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so it's on the wall at She Scores Bangers, pretty much on every platform. It's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, whichever streaming platform you listen to, like Connor already greatly introduced. The 3 episodes previewing all 12 teams, kind of doing what Connor and I just did, diving a little bit deeper into their history at the Olympics, their roster, their current form, as well as I did an interview with Bev Priestman, who is, the reigning Olympic head coach. How she bounced back from the World Cup, which was not a very fun World Cup for any Canadian or Bev, who's not Canadian, and how she hopefully looks to, defend gold this time. So, everything will be on She Scores Bangers, is where you'll find all these fun chit chats.
No, absolutely. Make sure you go and check all of that stuff out. It's definitely worth it on that one. Yes, I am. I hope this isn't Emma Hayes' burner account on YouTube and she's gonna come to get me on that one. Absolutely brilliant to have all of you watching along as we've been going through this over the last hour or so. Yes, the Olympics is coming. There we go. I'm sure you're doing content as well throughout the Olympics. You're definitely not going to be stopping, are you?
No, a lot of content on the channel, and then just a few days ago I released my own Substack. So if you're not hearing some coverage on the pod, it's probably written work. Also, Substack at She Scores Bangers. You'll find that also on Twitter, She Scores Banger. I mean, it's the same name all across. So if you look it up, you'll find it on a few platforms.
It's incredibly easy to find. It's in the description anyway of this video if you can't find it on that one. Make sure you're liking this video, subscribing as well. We'll have our own kind of Olympics content over the next kind of couple of weeks. I hope we've got you excited for it, because I am even more excited now for the Olympics starting in a couple of days' time as well. So lots to look forward to. Have a good rest of your evening and rest of the week, and we shall see you guys in the next one.